Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 21st Century Renaissance. I am your host, Dr. Michael Opiano. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming as my guests Andrew Morehouse and Ilse Morehouse, co-founders of LAC, that is Latinitas Animi Causa. Very excited to have them with us today. Andrew Morehouse is currently an instructor at the Woodstock Academy in Connecticut for a number of different subjects. And Ilse Morehouse is currently pursuing her PhD at Boston University. She is in her fourth year of her studies in the classics department. Very pleased to have them with us today, coming in from Woodstock, Connecticut. So thank you guys. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. It's so great to see you.
Yes. For those of you who might not know, right, Andrew and I have a friendship going back to 2016, right? So
Yes,
8 years. We met in Rome during the during a spoken Latin, a living Latin program with the Paideia Institute back in 2016.
Yes, indeed. And that was my first occasion of speaking Latin. And Ilse actually also, ironically and coincidentally, also started speaking Latin in 2016, though not with Paideia.
Interesting. So yes, this is actually the first time that I've had the chance to meet Ilse, given that I've spent quite a number of the past few years not in the United States, in Poland in particular. But Ilse, I understand you're originally from Johannesburg, South Africa. That's correct, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And how did you get introduced to spoken and active Latin in 2016? That's very interesting.
So in 2015, my the director of the School of Ancient Languages at the University of Potchefstroom, which is about 2 hours from Johannesburg, where I was working at the time, was teaching there, and the director of the school had gone to a Rusticatio with Salvi, who's another organization, nonprofit, that teaches people how to speak Latin over summers mostly. And she had gone in 2014, and she invited the president of the organization and I think the founder, Nancy Llewellyn, and the president, John Byron Kuhner, and his wife, Catherine, to South Africa to come and talk about spoken Latin for our biannual classical conference in South Africa. And that's when I was first introduced to it. They had a great time, and they said at the end of their trip asked if we would be interested in coming to the US and actually attending a real Rusticatio. It's a week-long event of Latin immersion. So we were, of course, very excited at the prospect, and they pulled it off. They found sponsors for 5 of us to come over in 2016. So that's what I did in my summer of 2016. And it was an amazing experience. Immediately fell in love, not just with, the idea of actually being able to speak Latin, but just the community that it can create. And so haven't looked back since. I've gone every year since then. Even when I was in South Africa, found a way to get back here and do it. And I was very fortunate to be able to come in 2017, and that's the year where I met Andrew at Rusticatio.
Ah, that's right. Okay, you guys, that's right. You read through Salvi at these Rusticationes. So very good. What was that? Well, you said you fell in love with the Latin language. It seems that there was some other falling in love, perhaps, that took place. Maybe you could share a little bit of that story with us.
Ilse, why don't you start, and we'll just riff off each other. It'll be great.
Okay. So the second year I went, obviously, this is in 2017, I was not there with 3 other South Africans and 1 person from the Netherlands. I was on my own and didn't really know many of the people there, although the people there, most of them had connected earlier in that year at other conferences in the US, of course. And so I remember just sitting at the table on the English night, which is the first night, and I wasn't really sure what to do. And everyone was really friendly, but I didn't really feel connected, and suddenly Andrew pulled me into the conversation, and he has a magical way of doing that, and that's something he does in our classes too, that really creates a very good sense of community and a really healthy, supportive culture within our organization. And so, yeah, we try to just be friends because we were living in two different countries and other reasons, and
It didn't take.
it didn't take. We had to say goodbye a week and a half later, and we were both just crying.
Yeah, and we spent almost all of our time. I mean, we spent almost all of our time at the Rusticatio together, right? And of course, all that time is in Latin because at the Rusticationes, for those who don't know, right, Salvi is the Septentrionale Americanum Latinitatis Vivae Institutum, the Living Latin Institute of North America, right? And they hold summerly meetings that they call Rusticationes, right? Country spending times, right? And when we're there, it's required that we only speak Latin. It's immersion, right? Now, granted, when I say it's required we only speak Latin, no one's sending you home if you slip a word of English, but that's the goal is that everyone is there to try to get better at spoken Latin or be introduced to spoken Latin. So that's what we do. And that was my first week-long event. That was an immersion event through Salvi. I had done a couple of bidua previously, the Biduum Noe Bracense with the aforementioned John Byron Kuhner, who is also an instructor of Michael and mine. At the Paideia Institute, Capellatus as he is called. The guy's got a lot of hair. Yep. And then the Biduum Virginianum afterwards. And when Ilse and I met, it was electric. It was like sparks were flying, right? And we just spent all of our time always speaking in Latin. We were then working also on a Latin musical, which was produced at that Rusticatio for the celebration of the Salvi 20th anniversary, the Auricula Meretricula Musicula. It was tradition at the Rusticationes that there's a little booklet, a libretto, I guess you would call it, right, called Auricula Meretricula, right, which means what it might sound like, right? And so what that means is that it was originally supposed to be written as a way to introduce students into plough time plays and plough time themes, right? And Terentian themes in Roman comedy. And so that's why the name, but it was supposed to be comic. And Nancy Llewellyn and Joel Derfner, who is a theater instructor in New York and Manhattan, they created the musical version. Joel did the music and Nancy Llewellyn wrote the lyrics. And so Ilse and I were part of that debut of that show for the Salvi 20th, but we also did the dress rehearsal at the Rusticatio. So not only were we spending time entirely in Latin, which is a sort of a stressful thing for your first time, perhaps, or it's at least certainly vigorous, right? I tend not to use the word vigorous, but it's certainly quite vigorous. You're spending a lot of time entirely in Latin. Your brain's working a lot, but also we were doing daily rehearsals of an hour and a half to 3 hours while everyone else is enjoying break time, doing the musical. So we spent a lot of time together. And during that time, I just, I fell in love, right? And when we said goodbye, as Ilse said, it was such a tearful goodbye that I was dumbfounded by how much I felt in that moment for a woman I'd only known for a week and a half, right? And so it was powerful.
Yes, I think I can remember. I want to say we had a sort of, I think in maybe late August or September. I think it was when I had come back from my summer in 2017 in Poland. I want to say it was the two of us. I want to say maybe we met up with, maybe Tyler was in town for something. I forget. Maybe it was just Claire.
I think it was Claire, yeah.
It was definitely Claire. I want to say we went to, where was it? I want to say we went to, it was either in Hartford or we went to, I remember the specific time that we went to a diner in Orange. And
yep, I remember that.
It was after we went to this diner, Chip's Diner. I remember we stopped over at my house. Actually, I want to say it was before we went. This is when it was. It was before we went to the Paideia conference in New York.
Yes,
that's when it was. The
that is
following
correct.
February.
Yep.
We went to Chip's, and I remember that you were still very much head over heels in your emotional disposition towards Ilse. And I remember we were about to leave to go to the conference as you were talking about Ilse, and you said, can't wait for you to get a chance to meet her. So it is
It's true.
finally a privilege to be able to do that now. So there you have it, everyone. You too can experience love through living Latin. Wonderful story. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful story. And of course, Ilse, well, actually then right after that, Andrew, you ended up going and teaching some living Latin in South Africa, right? At some point, didn't you? You worked in South Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, so I in 2017, right? So this is after the Rusticatio, after our Salvi events, I had gone to Living Greek in Greece with also with Paideia. And then I had a job at a middle school in Western Massachusetts, and that job, for lots of reasons and through various causes, was not for me, right? And so I had ended up going to visit Ilse in November of that year for Thanksgiving. I did in November. No, granted, for Thanksgiving that means I was there for 5 days, maybe 4 days. And I did a nonstop flight, which is about 14 and a half hours from New York to Johannesburg, right? I remember that being one of the longest flights of my life for a number of reasons. One, I had not seen Ilse since summer properly. Two, or no, that's not true. Ilse had come over to the States but like a month before. I lied. Yeah. I still missed her quite a bit, right? And so that was indeed...
We were speaking on the phone every day for hours. Like most of our waking time, if I wasn't teaching, we were talking. Even when we were just working, right? Like on our own separate things. So.
Yeah. And that's something that's true even now. The sermo never friget, right? Our conversations never stop. They never freeze, right? We still have long and lively conversations, which sometimes stops us from getting work done we should get done, but that's beside the point. But regardless, flew down to South Africa, right? And I saw her and I met her, like her family, right? Properly, like her mother, her son, our son, I should say. At that time, he was 9 years old when I met him. And it was I was like, why am I miserable in Western Massachusetts with this job that I hate when I could be here and not at a place that I hate, right? And so I decided to pick up and move there. And so for 2 years, Ilse was a lecturer at the Northwest University in Potchefstroom, South Africa. And I sort of did some classes there and some pro bono work, as well as teaching online. That's when I really started to do a lot more online teaching and online instruction through private tutors and at that time Telepaideia. So this is before the genesis of LAC, right, where we're mostly an online instruction program, among many other things that we do. But for our classes, they're primarily online instruction programs. But I got a lot of experience while being in South Africa. And because of the unfortunate sort of turn of fate of how the economy is in South Africa and the income inequality, it means that I could earn what would be basically poverty level in the United States and be able to live fairly comfortably in South Africa, which means that I could teach online primarily and not worry too much about paying bills and the like.
Yeah, that's a similar, this is a similar situation to some things that I'm doing now in Poland, actually, right? I'm teaching a number of classes online, which in the United States, of course, would not really suffice to pay the bills, but here it's, just fine, right? Not Scrooge McDuck into a pond of money, right? but right, it pays the bills, and it allows me to have some of the time needed to get started generating some of this. So
I don't mean to distract from the conversation, but I do want to say that it's amazing that Scrooge McDuck has that much money and couldn't afford pants. But let's move on. Right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think this is a good segue, right? Andrew, certainly your experience in public schools, right, in middle schools in the United States, sort of giving you this drive to go online, to try to move out, to try something new, start something on your own. What was that experience? What was the difficulty that drove you out of teaching in the public schools? Besides, right, of course, you have on the one side, you have, of course, your love is across the sea, and you're very excited to go spend time there, right? But right, there's also this other force pushing you from behind that says, well, hey, I'm not sure I really want to be here doing this. So
Right.
what was that difficulty?
Well, that's a great question. There are a number of factors that were involved in that. So I'll say that before I taught at this middle school, I'd already done my practicum at a high school in Northampton, Massachusetts that went swimmingly and I loved, right? And when I say practicum, like student teaching and so on and so forth, basically after week 1 or week 2, I was handed all the classes. And the reason I say that is that the person who was my mentor teacher, whom I admire and love dearly, Jim Bridgman. He was also Claire Mears' Latin teacher, who is our...
Oh, really?
Yes, he is.
Friend,
who is
yes.
our third podcast host, a very small world that we live in, right? He handed me the classes because he thought I was so eminently capable to be able to handle them. And I'm not saying that for any other reason than that's why I essentially had 3 Latin classes all to my own. And most student teachers onboard more slowly. They'll take more hours in the classroom, or they'll take more minutes in the classroom, and then eventually by the end of their practicum in the last month, they will be teaching all 3 classes or 4 classes or whatever the schedule maintains. But I was teaching all 3 from like the get-go because I am very comfortable as an instructor. I had already taught through 2 semesters at UMass Amherst as well. I've been doing tutoring and some sort of instruction through a lot of my life. In some form or fashion. I knew I wanted to be a Latin teacher, or I knew I wanted to be a teacher since 7th grade. I knew I wanted to be a Latin teacher since about 11th grade. It's just something I've always loved. I love to be able to help people to form themselves. I love to be able to share knowledge. I love sharing knowledge. I love being able to put that out there so that other people can enjoy it and better themselves in some way. And to a selfish end, I also enjoy being center person on stage sometimes. And like being a teacher sometimes means that. And I'm learning more and more as I become a better teacher what times I have to be center stage and what times I have to be backstage, right? And putting someone else in center stage. And that's something that I learn more and more as I mature and as I become a better teacher. But my point in that is that I had some pretty decent experience in teaching, and then I got to this job. The middle school job that I'm talking about, I just had no administrative support, really.
Okay.
When I got the classroom I was in was, for the amount of students I had, possibly a fire hazard, right? The size was too small for the number of students. I had no orientation at the school. Like I didn't even know where the copier was. Like when I showed up for orientation for new teachers, they were like, it's canceled. And I was like, okay, so I don't know what I'm doing, right? And then when I got to the school, like the first 3 weeks, I didn't have a computer, a projector, a whiteboard, anything. I was drawing on 11 by 17 drawing paper to try to teach my classes. And as a first year teacher where everything is mine, and I was building a program, it wasn't a program I inherited. I had to build a program and trying to find my feet and do all of that while, also Ilse is across the sea and I was living on my own for the first time. And all these different factors came together. Really, honestly, like I won't put a veil over what I'm saying. I can't find the English word. To say that like I fell into a pretty deep depression, right? It was bad because like my career that I thought was the thing that was fulfilling and I loved and I did just felt like it was already at its end because I just was not happy. So when I left that behind and I went to go to South Africa, I actually didn't teach I actually assisted Ilse in her classes for the first, about month or 2, right? I essentially acted as a whatever she needed me to be in the classroom. Sometimes that meant acting things out. Sometimes that meant doing spoken Latin activities. Sometimes that meant being quiet and drawing on the board or whatever she needed. I was there to do that. And it was sort of
Joke teller. Yes.
Good
I
joke
don't tell
teller.
jokes very well. Yeah, I don't tell jokes very well, but Andrew, he lands them very well. So
Okay.
yeah, it's very useful,
well,
amongst
that's
other things.
So Latin this is primarily in Latin classes. Yes, Ilse, you're also lecturing in Latin at Western University. And what is the name of this? You mentioned the name of this town.
Northwest
University. It's in the Northwest province. That's what it's called.
The university is Northwest, but there was another one you said. It was like Pachos.
Oh, Potchefstroom is the town it was in.
Potchefstroom. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were
Because
teaching
it's
at Northwestern. Go on.
No, so yeah, Northwest University. It's because it's the university for that province.
Mhm.
There are 3 campuses, and we were on the main one, which is Potchefstroom. So it
Okay.
was mostly Latin classes. Andrew would especially join me in the Latin classes that were like the bigger ones. I had Latin 1,
Mhm.
which I had about 50 students. So he would, even if he didn't specifically, it's not like he was, sometimes he wasn't actually teaching, but he was just there and we could riff off each other. And it's great for spoken Latin for beginners to have somebody
Mhm.
there with whom I can speak and I can use as a model, right? Students can already see
Mhm.
how to do specific things. And Andrew actually helped me develop the classroom, still keeping a lot of the grammar, but just enhancing it with some spoken Latin. So he helped
Mhm.
me adjust my curriculum and my, including all my assessments in a way
Mhm.
that where like students can actually learn the
Mhm.
language and not just learn the
Mhm.
rules.
Mhm.
It's great.
Yes. So Ilse, this is a good point, I think, for us to, well, at least for me to speak a little bit about why, in particular, I invited the two of you onto 21st Century Renaissance. And it's this particular element that you've gestured to here in your classroom, right? So this idea of, well, which might strike a number of people, maybe with our experience, right, having been through active Latin programs, having done through, comprehensible input and things like this, maybe not so foreign to us since we've been doing this since 2016, but for a great many people, I'm sure it will come as a surprise that there are people out there who are teaching spoken Latin, right, who are coming into a Latin classroom and talking in Latin and speaking in Latin. And um, one of the parallels that I suppose I see here in the sort of work that you guys are doing, that you have been doing both in your respective pedagogies in Latin classrooms prior to starting your independent project here with LAC, Latinitas Animi Causa, that this element itself is something that bears some similarity to the Renaissance, and I'll explain what I mean by that. The 15th century, well, the 14th and 15th century in Italy were an interesting time in terms of changing standards and attitudes toward the Latin language, right? For those of us listening, right, throughout the Middle Ages, right, Latin never really disappeared. There's sort of this idea of Latin being a dead language. We hear this a lot, right? This is something of a 19th century bias, right, among people who did not want such impractical subjects as Latin taught in school. This idea it's a dead language, that it it was spoken by the Romans, and then only a few people kind of scribbled it down on paper or something like that for several hundred years, right? Of course, this is far from the case. The Middle Ages in the West, or in Western Europe, are referred to very often as the Latin Middle Ages, due to the intense shared Latin culture among many European countries. The Renaissance was an interesting pivot with respect to this, in that there were a number of crises facing various societies, many of them moral, or various societies, I should say, right? This Latin West, right? This medieval Latin Western society. And many of these crises, such as there's a crisis in the church, there are crises of authority between the church and the medieval empire at the time. There were concerns over the inflow of money, especially, right, of trade wealth. And many of these concerns were moral concerns. And the way that, say, Renaissance humanists, individuals like Petrarch or Leonardo Bruni, 14th and 15th century thinkers, thought about how they might try to answer these questions, how they might try to resolve some of these moral problems, was by turning to classicizing Latin, was by attempting to bring classical Latin authors, individuals like Cicero, to a broader public, right? To serve the sons and daughters as well of the Italian city-states, and the princes, right, the princes of Christendom, to educate them in such a way that they might see moral improvement, that they might actually be able to understand some of these classical authors on their own terms by having this modified standard of eloquence that fit toward classical standards. And that involved, right, not just, this is a particular complaint that they had, a particular complaint of these Renaissance thinkers, of the Renaissance humanists, as we typically refer to them today, was that Latin in the classroom had become too legalistic, right? It was too deployed methodically for the purposes of going to the professional schools. There was no beauty, there was no play in the language that students who had to learn would go to, say, the cathedral schools or some of the local communal schools. They would work with just sort of memorizing forms, right? Memorizing words, memorizing grammar structures. They would just do this so that they could go and they could read their law books and then go on to law school or maybe enter the priesthood or something like that, right? This was a problem then. So with your program, right, with what you are doing here with Latinitas Animi Causa, perhaps you might translate this for us and tell us what the aims of your program are here. What is Latinitas Animi Causa?
That's a really great question. Ilse, is it okay if I take this one?
Oh, please do.
Yeah, so Latinitas in here is standing in for the Latin language, or the mental conception of what it means to speak Latin, right? If we look actually at the definition of Latinitas as it exists in the Rhetorica ad Herennium, which is a work that was attributed to Cicero for many years, which we know not to be now, but we just attribute to an anonymous author, Latinitas is defined as the absence of solecism and barbarism, right? So grammatical accuracy and staying true to what you would say in Latin. There's a little bit of irony in that in the work, right, that we see, it says soloikismos and barbarismos, both of which are Greek words used to define the purity of Latin sermo, right? Which is kind of ironic, right? But what we see, and Ilse and I and Claire on our podcast, Latinitas Animi Causa, have talked a bit about talking about how Latinitas as a term, which is sometimes used in the sort of mainstream Latin spaces as a form of derision of those who are not yet good at Latin, to be rather a way that we can define a mental representation of Latin. That is, what does it feel like when you speak Latin? What does Latin feel like to you? Not what are the rules in Allen and Greno or some other old dusty grammar book, right? So that includes, however, that we understand what Latinity would be even for those who were writing graffiti on walls, right? So that is Latinitas to us. It is the idea of what it is to feel Latin. And then animi causa, right? Which is a phrase that means for the sake of the soul or for the sake of the mind, literally. But it's an idiom that means for fun, for a distraction, that is not for the sake of work or for the sake of study per se, but is for fun. So Latinitas Animi Causa is essentially Latin for fun, right? And that abbreviates to LAC, which is milk in Latin, which nourishes us. So we are nourished by Latinitas, and our website is habesnelac.com, right? It literally translates to gotmilk.com, but do you have latinitasanimicausa.com? I was quite proud of that URL when we came up with it in South Africa one day. I remember we were driving to pick up Victor from school, and I was like, Habesnelac, it's got to be it, right? As we came up with this name, because we indeed are nourished by this idea, for, like, we specifically, and other people can be too. And what we want to do, our mission, is multiplex, it's multifold. But I think among the highest things is access and building a community where people can come in and they can access ancient languages in a fun, effective, efficient, and non-judgmental way. We have been in many spoken Latin spaces in our time speaking Latin, right? Not all of them have been as open and fostering of people for who they are. And it ultimately comes down to, we need to teach the human beings in front of us. We need to teach the human beings for who they are and for who their identities are. And Latin is something that we love deeply and we find that the literature and the communities that we have found for ourselves in spoken Latin have nourished us. So we want to provide a similar thing for other people, and part of that therefore is increasing access, keeping things free or low priced, and other forms of access as well. And I don't want to talk too much because I think Ilse wants to add something. Ilse, would you like to add anything to what I said? Because there are many other things that we do and many other parts of our mission, but I think that comes to the highest point.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I agree with everything you said. Obviously, I would add that, and I think you mentioned this, but or it comes through, but it's not. It's obviously making it inclusive of anyone who really wants to learn, but also that specific also means for us, in some Latin spaces, people are accepted, but it's so difficult to be a beginner. People aren't very accepting of errors in some things, and this is where Andrew's work in second language acquisition theory really comes in, right? Where we try to stay on top of he especially does this, to stay on top of the newer research with regard to how we learn languages, and we try to incorporate those principles. And so there are multiple factors. The pedagogy is just as important to us as the Latin itself, right? And we wanted to do this because we met in Latin, we fell in love in Latin, and we live it. We live that's the life we live, and we wanted to bring that to people who are interested. And we found, and we're still creating, an amazing community of people who are very supportive and wonderful, and not just of us, but of each other. And so we are always so happy to do that, to bring some fun back to it. It's not just the stuffy old language, with professors in a dark lit room. So it's, yeah, we wanted to do that. That's part of our mission. Yeah.
Thank you for adding that, Ilse, about the linguistic inclusion and stuff like that. Another one thing that Ilse also does. So I work a lot on second language acquisition theory and do that, but Ilse has been spending a lot of her time recently delving into I don't know the actual term for it, but brain science, right? So I think there's probably a more fancy term for it, but who needs it? She's still going into brain science. How do brains do things? How do brains learn? How do our human brains acquire, learn languages, develop habits, develop relationships, develop all these things? Ilse has been doing a lot of work in that. So between the two things, when we talk about access, not only for people's identities and who they are, it also, as Ilse optimize Latin very well stated, right? That this has been happening to me, by the way, the whole conversation. I just finished teaching high school Latin, so my brain is still switching to English. But she so very well stated is that, like, we also want to be supportive of learning the ancient languages in a way that human brains learn languages.
So I want to ask a bit more about this in particular. I've also become interested in the psychological, cognitive, right, brain science, neuroscience foundations of classical modes of education. Basically, one of my other sort of working hypotheses is that there were very effective modes of teaching, right? When you read histories of what, say, these early classical schools in, say, the 16th or the 17th century looked like, right? By age 18, like, these kids were coming out of these schools fluently speaking Greek and Latin, being able to, like, you hear things like in the 19th century, right? Like Teddy Roosevelt being able to write parallel translations of the like a Greek and a Latin translation of the Odyssey, like simultaneously with both hands. I don't know if it was that crazy, right? But there's this anecdote about him. But these schools, right, for many hundreds of years, right, these schools that Renaissance humanists founded had this way of being able to produce these really miraculous, what to us would seem miraculous, right? Like, how often do you come across someone who's not only fluent in speaking and composing things in Latin, but Greek as well? What is right? Okay, so right, my working hypothesis is that, right, they had these methods of teaching that were clearly effective, But as we've sort of moved into thinking, well, okay, now we only say move forward with different theories, right? We moved away from the classical theories where most things were sort of taken on faith, right? Well, let's say, the Romans learned like this, and they built the greatest empire anybody ever heard of, and the Greeks made more discoveries than anybody ever heard of. So let's go with their teaching methods, right? Something like that. So, but my thought here is, right, since we've established new standards of determining what is effective, of being able to put our trust in something, right? For example, psychology and neuroscience are new standards by which we place our faith in a learning methodology or not. And what my sort of hypothesis, another part of this 21st century Renaissance hypothesis, is this idea that there are maybe traditional modes that had the gist of some of these learning theories very accurate and were very effective. But we lost faith along the way as part of this transition between modes of proof or modes of trust in our history in the West. What have you found about, say, language learning? What have you focused on? What are some of the practices that you guys use either with your media, both what you put online and you guys also have classrooms, right? You have courses that you put online. So what are these elements, right? Maybe you could speak to some of these so we could get an idea of what your pedagogy in the classroom looks like, how that works online, and how that's set apart from, say, like what happens in a university classroom nowadays.
Yeah. Ilse, do you have anything you want to say first?
I mean, right now, for the last couple of years, there seems to be a big interest in brain-based learning, brain-based education, which is great. And it's all about, really what it comes down to is making education accessible, right? In many different ways. And, there are some basic things like having more natural light in the classroom means students learn better, right? And having access to just good oxygen, like good air, like very basic things that can make learning so much easier and better. And so that's a really good thing. Unfortunately, we're still lagging behind people trusting or even learning more about this and changing their traditional ways. And then we see this also with how Latin is taught as a grammar translation based versus using models.
Just to make sure that our audience understands this, when you say grammar translation, what do you mean when you say that? I think I also said that once. What do you mean when you say this?
That is focusing, for the teaching of Latin, focusing on teaching the grammar, all the rules of the language, and just vocabulary versus just focusing on the language itself. So it's different from, there's a reading method that's often combined with the grammar method where you do some reading as well, very basic Latin. And then there's also the direct approach, which is more in line with second language acquisition theory, where you start kind of speaking, you start using the language in a more direct way, and you just have a lot of exposure to the language at a level that you understand, and that falls within other second language acquisition theories that Andrew can talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, when we talk about second language acquisition theory, it has moved beyond I shouldn't say move beyond, but it has built upon comprehensible input hypothesis. So the comprehensible input hypothesis, for those who are not yet acquainted with this idea, was a hypothesis proposed by Stephen Krashen in the 1970s and 80s. Stephen Krashen also is a second language acquisition researcher, and essentially he put out 5 hypotheses that suggest how we learn languages. And now we are seeing data bear out on each of these hypotheses and how they work. And foundational in these hypotheses is probably the input hypothesis, the one that everyone knows most about, or the one that people talk most about, which is what Krashen defines as I+1. I is what you understand, right? And +1 is the next level, the next increment up of new knowledge. So the idea is when you're learning a language, or really this applies for a lot of different domains of learning, when you are learning something, you want to have a base level of knowledge, and you don't want to be had at a +2, +3, +4. And this often happens in what's referred to, like what is referred to as grammar translation, right? Where grammar translation at its core is the memorization of rules and basic vocabulary, and then handing someone a text and asking them to decode it based on these rules and vocabulary into another language that is the medium of the class. So for instance, if your class is in English, you are having them take a work by Cicero and translating it into English. What ends up happening, though, is that there's not real comprehension often happening. People often translate into English that either is gobbledygook, or they will translate it into English perfectly with no comprehension of what the English or the Latin mean, but they know the constituent parts meaning and they put them together. And what that means is that comprehension isn't really happening. And so that is an example of someone being at like an I plus like 7, right? Where the text that's in front of you is so far above your base level of knowledge that it's actually not really helping you to acquire much in the way of language. And so that is the core like input hypothesis as it is put forward. They comprehend language input that is only a little bit more advanced than their current level of knowledge. So, and that's the core hypothesis that he proposes. He proposes also the acquisition learning hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis, the natural order hypothesis, and the effective filter hypothesis. And the effective filter hypothesis might be beneficial when we talk about the brain-based learning that Ilse just brought up. She talked about how we have natural light, or we talk about fresh air, or we talk about we need basic human needs to be met. You need to be in a situation where you are physically safe, where you are mentally safe and emotionally safe before any real progress and learning can occur, right? When we look at a lot of these classical schools historically, part of why they were so successful with their audience is because their audience was so select, or it came from a very specific set of people that had a lot of those needs already met, right? And so if we have base needs met of people, right, of how we function, then learning can start to take place. And so that the effective filter largely refers to the feeling of shame or stress that comes up. It's when you know when you get cold called by your teacher and they say, "Hey Andrew, what's the answer to 7?" And then you feel that immediate rise of like stress, or that's essentially the effective filter raising, and you going, and that's why your immediate response is often not the answer to number 7, right? But your immediate response is stopping. And so the goal in any classroom, I think, but especially in a language classroom, is to keep the effective filter as low as possible so that you can receive information, right? That's more or less what is getting at there. And right now, that is foundational in second language acquisition theory. There are few to no second language acquisition theorists who say that you do not need input to be successful. The role of grammar, the role of translation, the role of a bunch of other things are still in somewhat debate, though we're seeing trends in certain directions. But it is foundational that in order for you to produce anything in language with a level of competency, you first have to have seen that thing you are being asked to produce a bunch of times in a meaningful context that excites you, compels you, without feeling an undue amount of stress. Stress is antithetical to a good learning environment.
Yeah, that's very interesting. While you've been speaking about this, right, I've been thinking about, as I mentioned, I've done some more reading on my own recently as well in the area, right, of and two psychologists, right, come to mind with respect to these ideas. So one of them is Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, who did quite a lot of work, right, on developmental psychology. He's known for his invention of the field genetic epistemology, which is his way of investigating, right, how people learn and know things. And of course, he has some of these concepts that you've sort of mentioned, but by other terms, right? So there's this idea that Piaget talks about this, as well as some other psychologists, right? The idea of the zone of proximal development, which sounds quite a lot like this I+1, right? The ideal place to be is just a little bit. Yes, exactly. Right. Just a little bit ahead of where you are, right? So you want to have, say, 1 foot in something that's new and one foot in, well, on solid ground, so to speak, right? And be able to kind of go back and forth between this, be able to relate just to that bit of newness that's capable for you to, as Piaget would say, assimilate to what you know. He has these two systems, assimilation and accommodation, that he says are active, say when children go about learning, right? And adults as well. He doesn't write as much about adults, but the idea is, right? We have these two principal sort of structures of learning. Assimilation being this going from the known, meeting an anomaly, and then attempting to fit the anomaly into some structure that we already have made, right? To relate the anomaly to our model of the world, what we already know. And then accommodation is then a process thereafter when we find out, well, it doesn't really fit quite well into what I know, so I must reconfigure my structure of the world in order to accommodate this novelty and this anomaly. The other individual who I've been reading closely over the past about year is a neuroscientist recently deceased. I think he passed away in about the past 5 years. Originally Estonian. His name is Jaak Panksepp. Jaak Panksepp has a number of books. His first sort of big hit is called Affective Neuroscience, 1998. The other, which I read just this past summer, is called Archaeology of Mind, came out together with Lucy Bivin in 2013. And in this work, right, he talks about there being a specific circuit, right, a specific set of interconnected regions of the brain that correspond to play. So exactly this idea sort of touching on affective filter, right? Is it affective or it's affective filter?
It's
yes?
affective, correct, yes.
Affective.
Yep.
Exactly, right? Exactly, right? So Panksepp, being an affective neuroscience, is very interested in this bottom-up model of the brain, right? It is this anti-cognitivist model, not top-down, right? The neocortex, everything on top does everything, which is sort of like, right? You want to think of the top-down model maybe as corresponding to this grammar translation way of learning that you guys are talking about. And the bottom-up, right? Using affect, understanding how fundamental our emotional centers are to effective learning. He also talks about how this play circuit, right, specifically of stress, fear, rage, anxiety, whatever it is, if any of these other circuits, these affective circuits, are active, the play circuit is inhibited. It can't work, it can't fire, and then you can't get into this optimal state of learning. Play being, of course, this optimal state of learning, given the sort of, say, he talks about there being sort of a lack of impediments to social confidence when one is in a state of play. And therefore, individuals who are experiencing this affective state of play are always, right, they are more willing to try again, right? If they fail, they're like, I'll just go again, right? It's, you know, if you're, it sounds like, right, you're talking about maybe when that play circuit is not active. If someone makes a mistake, it heavily discourages them from participating. Maybe they'll just give up on the game entirely, something like that.
No, sure, yeah, absolutely. That's can you name the neuroscientist again, the Estonian neuroscientist?
Yes, it's a peculiar name. I'll write it down for you after our conversation here. It's well, I'll say it out loud. Maybe some of our audience would be interested in as well. It's Jaak Panksepp. It is an Estonian name. That's let's see. Jaak is spelled Jaak.
Love
and then
that.
his last name, Jaak. And then Panksepp is Panksepp. Jaak Panksepp. I think he was a very long time in the teaching at the University of Washington out on the West Coast. Yeah.
And that's been a core principle of what we do, and which is why Animi Causa is in our name, is how we bring fun and play into what we do. We want people to be experiencing learning in a way that makes them forget their learning, right? Which is, you know, during play and during, you know, safety and joy, right? That's largely it. And yeah, which is part of why what we also do is we play video games in Latin on Twitch, right? Among many other things that we do.
Nice.
Like, Yes, because not only is it linguistically helpful to have visual context and audio context for what you're doing, but additionally, people are so compelled or enjoy, say, watching someone play Skyrim or playing the game Skyrim, that when they hear someone doing Latin, it connects and fires off more things that they can connect to, right?
Yeah.
It's a core part of any, I mean, if we look at school, which ultimately comes from the Greek word schole, which is leisure, right? It's what you do in your spare time, right? There should be joy. There should be liberal pursuit, right? Free from a certain amount of care and worry in order to be able to really, really, the words are failing me now, but really learn something deeply, for
Yes.
lack of better
Yes.
words, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've spoken a lot. I wonder if Ilse wants to add anything about that.
No, I like everything that you have said. I'm so happy to hear that you find neuroscience interesting. It's great to meet a fellow enthusiast.
Hmm. Yeah, it's been something that's taken my attention over the past few years, I guess. Those of you who see some of my content, who have listened to me recently, right? It really changed the way for me, I think, that I thought about a number of things in, say, history or language or teaching in general, right? This is also listening to your story, right, Andrew, your difficulties in some of your early teaching positions. I also found some of these difficulties in some of my early teaching, some of my early university classrooms. Right, people who, in a lot of places, universities have become sort of degree farms, right? Students come, they just want to get through class, right? They just want to get their A, because they're told that if they go to this university, then they're going to go and get a job, right? And so they sort of gut through whatever course, even if, right, that they might not have very capable reading skills. They may really have actually never been in a history class before, something like that. They may have never really sat down and read a whole book, right? Being in college, never actually sat down and read a whole book, something like that. And so these questions of okay, there's got to be a better way to organize this. There's got to be a better way to do this. There's also got to be a way to do this for example, fewer than $45,000 a year. So
Certainly.
this was something that I experienced, right, attending a number of my classes. Right, I was an adjunct professor. I was not given for those of you not familiar with how the university structure works, right? There are people who are in tenure track jobs who lead to tenure, right? The assistant professor level and above. There are people who are on a lecture track, which you're a permanent employee, but basically the university has freedom to fire you if they would like. Tenured professors, right? They cannot be fired except for grievous misconduct, right? Something like that. I was an adjunct professor, which meant that I was allowed to teach classes on sort of a contract basis, but not sort of a liminal employee, right? I was not allowed to teach more than a certain number of classes because that meant that the university would have had to have given me benefits and increased my salary by 100% and things like that, right? Which they wanted to avoid. And I understand it's an expense. So universities have this policy, you can teach a certain number of classes and then you get to a level and then they say, okay, you're not allowed to do any more work because you're 5 hours a week away from us having to pay you a livable wage. So, but what struck me about this, right, I understand why universities do this, right? Problems though it may bring, but I understood, right, that, well, okay, it wasn't just me who was an adjunct, right? More than half of the classes that the students that I was teaching at my universities were also taught by adjuncts. And I did the math and I looked at expenses for an education. It was something like only 10%, as much, only maximally about 15% of the total tuition budget was actually going to the people who were teaching these classes. 85% of this 40 or 45,000 or $50,000 a year, right? I think there's even places like Tufts University where it's like $72,000 a year now.
Yeah, I have a student who went to Carnegie Mellon or is going to Carnegie Mellon, and it's something like 92 or something like that.
That is absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah, no,
my point of bringing this up, right? My point of bringing this up
Yeah.
is another thing that I noticed about your programs and what you guys are doing here, right? Obviously, you have your podcast, and you have Twitch streaming, right, where you offer content for free to people online through social media. But your courses in particular are also affordably priced. You guys are also trying to reach as many people as possible and make it fairly priced. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of that, about running the school and sort of what your pricing and courses are like there.
Yeah. Well, when Ilse and I set this out, Ilse's pointing to me. I do the majority of the teaching for a number of reasons, right? Largely they're time-based, right? Because Ilse's doing a PhD program, which is very demanding on time. But I mean, when we came out and decided what we were going to price our classes at, we looked at other prices in the market. We looked at other costs in the market. How much do things cost by other similar online programs? And we looked at what is it that we need to do to be able to live, right? What do we need? Because at the end of the day, I think what you were getting at. Right. It's an important consideration. Yeah. I mean, we had someone on Facebook, and I mean, I don't want to sit here and recently we did an episode of Rara Awis with Satura Longs, who's also a Latin podcaster and content creator, Irene Regini in Italy. And we talked about online haters, and I don't want to do that for too long, but I do want to say that when we advertise our classes on a platform on Facebook, someone said, there are people who are willing to teach this for free, so why should I bother for you, right? And I'm like, well, this is because this is, and
Well, actually, they said that there are teachers who love Latin more than money. That's what they said.
That is correct. That is true, which is worse. That is correct, right? And I don't normally engage, and certainly not upset, but I did upsetly say, like, how can you say that our need, right, for this is a career, this is what we do, right, for whatever, people do not know what our expenses are and what our life is, but like, we teach online classes. We're not looking to Scrooge McDuck it, as you said, right? We're not looking to sit there and, swim through gold, right? We do have this mission of providing people access to the ancient world, right, into ancient languages in a way that is not expensive and conducive toward the human mind. And how can doing that as your job as a professional also therefore be negated? Your love of Latin is negated because of that. And that's something that I could not bear, right? I felt that was an inappropriate way to put it. I can understand saying that people can do it for free, so why should I do it with you? Because that is a personal and economic choice, right? I can understand. I think at the heart of it, what's happening a lot in higher education especially is that we're forgetting that our job is people, right? As instructors, as educators, our job is people. Our job is to take care of people. That means that if you're an adjunct professor, you should be able to make cost of living. And if you're a student, you should not be going broke to get an education, right? People are at the core of it. People are the core of what we do, right? Without people, it's just Ilse and me talking to each other in Latin, right? Which is delightful in and of itself, but not congruent with our mission of remembering that human beings are the ones who want access to this. And we have so many people who have come through our classrooms online who have talked about how in the 8 weeks of our classes that cost $200 or $250 for 8 weeks or 10 weeks, depending on the course, right? That they learn more than they learned in an entire college semester, right? And that speaks volumes about what we are capable of doing, right? And I'm not necessarily saying like, down with universities, but I think that we need to refocalize our mission as to what we're supposed to be doing here. And that is teaching people and taking care of people so that they can come into society and take care of others. Right. And I think that we're losing sight of that to a certain degree. I think I wouldn't say we're losing sight of it as if it's a thing that's developing. I think we've lost sight of it. And I think that more and more places are cropping up where people are taking it out of the university, like ourselves, like Seamus McDonald, for instance, another friend of ours who teaches, he's the petrologist online. He also teaches ancient languages online. He similarly, I believe, got a PhD and found there were no positions for him. And he opened up his own school. Right. And so, and it's hard, right? And I can't, I feel like I'm rambling a bit here, but what I want to say is that a core principle is to make sure that they're affordable as much as we are able to do so.
Great, yeah. So if we had an independently wealthy patron, or we were independently wealthy ourselves, we would be doing this for free. We would have no problem with that. But as it stands, we don't have that. We are doing this to partly to supplement our income. When we started this, Andrew actually was working as a part-time teacher because he was supporting his mom. He had to stay at home to support his mom. She was diagnosed with breast cancer at the time, and he was, he wanted to be there for her, and so he couldn't take a full-time job, and so that's a big part of why we started this, is just to supplement our income. And at the time I was a tourist here, I was just visiting, so I couldn't make any money here. And now as a graduate student, I mean, you've been a graduate student at a college, it's, you don't, there's a stipend, but it's really small. It's not enough to sustain us. And Andrew is now a teacher full time, which is great, but we just don't have that. And so it's this sort of argument that this specific person brought up is very much the type of argument that is used against teachers when they ask for fair pay, right? But you should be doing it for the love of the kids and for the love of their education. It's like, oh, I guess I didn't pay anything for my education, or
You
put in
can't eat
100
love.
hours of work. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Love doesn't pay the rent,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And so there's just, but even considering that, we try to make sure that we can offer classes that are probably worth more than we're asking. That's what those are my words. That's some of the most common feedback we get. Yeah. Yes, they're like very happy that they say I'm very happy that this is affordable, but really I would be willing to pay more. So it's
High praise.
exactly right, because money is very close to people's hearts because we need it to live and eat.
Yes. Well, great. I mean, that's wonderful to hear that you guys are committed to this model. I mean, right, there is a difference between, there is a difference between doing something to make money and setting a price on something, right? And it's very interesting to see actually how people respond to things that are free versus things that have a price, right? Even if it's a low price.
It's true.
People actually take things for free less seriously. They value them less.
Exactly.
And one of the things that so my girlfriend Oksana, she also has an online business, right? She runs classes online in the area of fitness, of neurofitness, right? Of wellness, things like this. And one of the problems, right? We launched a course together back on her profile in September, where it was involving a number of these different things like you mentioned, Ilse. So things like, hey, like, did you know that, in order to really have health and success, say in diet and fitness, you should be sleeping well. If you're not sleeping well, then you're not going to progress optimally in these other areas. Did you know that a really important component of that is you waking up and seeing the sun right when you get up? Right? Did you know that you should go outside for 15 minutes and walk around, like as one of the first things you should do during the day if you want to sleep well at night? You should stop looking at devices, right, 2 hours before you go to sleep, something like that, optimally. These sorts of things. What we found, right, was we needed to build in this kind of game structure, and we needed to price the product appropriately in order to get people to actually do it. If you just offered things for free, right? Oksana offers all kinds of free trainings, things like that. People come, they do it, right? She even sells things for a low price, and she finds that if she puts the price too low, people don't complete the course. They don't feel like they've invested enough into it. And her mission, just like your mission, right, is to actually help people, is to be able to offer what she loves, what she's passionate about, for the sake of making people's lives better. And it's in the interest of that mission, if the price is too low, it will make her worse at that.
Yeah.
Finding the appropriate price, one that is high enough to say command the attention and the respect for the course, right? The perhaps discipline or the follow through on the part of who's taking it to actually, right, to show up and be able to complete the program as it is intended to be completed, right? There is a balance to say negotiate there. So
Right.
Exactly.
I think that's an important thing to recognize.
No, definitely. That's exactly like that. You know, our brains need some stakes. If it's just, if there are no consequences, it's more difficult to be invested. That's just, you know, this is how our brains work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what courses are you guys running right now? I'd love to be able to hear, just give you guys a chance to talk about some of this in case some of our audience is interested in
Absolutely.
participating. I'm sure
Yeah.
some people will be.
Well, we would love to have anybody and everybody. So we are running our winter course, winter term just started this past Sunday of courses. And I should say that Ilse and I don't do this alone. We also have other teachers that we contract to teach with us to teach Latin and Ancient Greek. That is included Claire Me, as we've mentioned several times on this podcast episode.
We love Claire.
We love Claire. Also our third interlocutor in our flagship podcast. Latinitas Animi Causa. She teaches often Greek classes with us, though obviously has more than enough capability to very well teach Latin classes, just that usually the demand for Greek is higher. But this term, I'll just read you some of the titles of courses in a brief description if I need them. So one class is called Sermunculi, Latin Chit Chats, made for any level, where it's really, the goal of it is to give, it's half an hour a week, right? So it's a low investment in time, but it's really, the conversation when we get there is to push them through the next week of studying on their own, right? Because a lot of this is also about building good autodidacts. Next is Latin with Ligonium, right? Ligonium's an awesome website run by Anthony Gibbons, an Australian. That is Lego Latin, really. Another class is Horatia, Virginia, and Tarpeia, Ladies Who Law. Roman Aesop, Phaedrus, reading book 2 of Phaedrus's Fables, who wrote Latin translations of Aesop fables. Ovid's exile poetry, reading the exile poetry of the great poet Publius Ovidius Naso, right? A medieval mosaic of post-classical Latin, because we don't restrict ourselves just to the classical period or to ancient authors. We really explore writings and readings from all over the temporal spectrum. Gesta Romanorum, right, a work written also in the medieval period. Vita Quotidiana, that means daily life, letters from Romans for daily life. So we read Latin letters and get to know Romans better, and sort of what a daily life would have looked like, honestly, for an elite status person, but it does still give us a window into what the high life was like. Activate Your Greek, Logos, using a book that was recently published by Cultura Classica, a Spanish publishing company. And finally, Advanced Latin Speaking, Consuetudines Discendi, Habits of Learning. And really, that's about how you push your Latin from the intermediate to the advanced and beyond. How do you get your Latin? How do you supercharge your fluency? And I mean, I don't want to say supercharge your fluency because that's almost like a buzzword to catch someone into something. But what habits really are productive for increasing your fluency, and what habits seem like they could be but really aren't, right? And how do we do that so that we really get a deep knowledge that allows us to read ancient texts with real fluency in real time? So that's our current lineup. And some terms we offer more, some terms we offer fewer. But generally speaking, we have usually around 10 to 12 classes per term.
Excellent. There will be, of course, to anyone listening, right, in the description, you can find links to Andrew and Ilse's classes. You can find links to their Twitch stream and to their activities on their podcast, right? You guys are on YouTube for your podcast and on is it Apple Podcasts as well? Or?
Yep, YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify,
Excellent.
Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. And yes, we're on YouTube we also have other YouTube content that's out there, including a video that came out today, which are 5 Latin quotes to inspire you for your new year, right?
Excellent. I will definitely be checking that out myself. I need some inspiration.
Wonderful.
Guys, thank you so much. Ilse, Andrew, wonderful to talk to you guys as always. Thank you so much for joining me, and best of luck in your endeavors.
Thank you
Thank
so much, Michael. This was a
Thank you
treat.
for inviting us. Yes, this was a really fun time, and good luck with this, endeavor for the 21st century Renaissance. Very excited to see everything that comes out of this.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm excited to see where it leads to. It's going to be an adventure. So
Yeah, man.
thanks everyone. Thanks as well to everybody listening. We'll see you next time on 21st Century Renaissance. Take care now.